Okay.
Okay. Well, welcome to our first ever public philosophy talk, and we are going to be discussing Rebecca Valeriano-Flores' work in philosophy and then beyond that, so in music and then activism. And I'll be kind of interviewing Rebecca this entire time. My name is Rene Ramirez. I'm a student at Loyola University Chicago, and then Gina is also helping sponsor and organize the event, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Gina Lepketcher, also a PhD student in philosophy at Loyola, and I will be your silent tech support / chat moderator. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way and let Renee and Rebecca take it away. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And if you have any questions, just shoot them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get to them.
Mhm. Yep, and also this is an announcement. This is a MAP or an LUC MAP sponsored event, and we organized it, and it's about minorities in philosophy. It kind of spread the ideas about how marginalized people have interacted with the work that's going on there as well. Okay, and Rebecca, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Just tell us about kind of the three broad areas we're going to be talking about, and then just where you're from and what you'll kind of do.
Yeah, hey, I'm Rebecca. I'm a grad student in philosophy at Loyola, obviously. I'm ABD, so my dissertation is in phenomenology, critical philosophy of race, existentialism, and the work of philosopher and psychiatrist Frantz Fanon. I'm also a musician. I play in a band. I've played in many bands. My current band is called Negative Scanner. We're a post-punk band, and I work with Black and Pink Chicago. It's a prison abolitionist group. Specifically, I work in something called a civil commitment working group, where we're doing participatory action, community-based research with some folks at a facility called Rushville. So yeah, those are kind of the three areas that I'm here to talk about today. Yeah.
Sure,
I've lived in Chicago. Yeah, I've lived in Chicago for like over 15 years. I'm originally from San Jose, California, but Chicago's my home. So
yeah. And what made you find philosophy in undergraduate? Like, what was attractive to you in the first place?
So I took a long time. The first time I went to college, I dropped out, and I worked full time as like a graphic designer for a few years before going back to finish my undergrad. But then when I went back, I wanted a change in something, and I wasn't sure. I had a lot of questions about the world and how to make the world a better place in some way. And so when I entered undergrad at DePaul, I kind of took classes in a lot of different areas to try to figure out what it was that I really wanted to do. And so I took classes in psychology and I took classes in sociology. And when I was finally taking classes in sociology, I started realizing that there's something here that I like, but it's definitely not the empirical stuff. For sure, not the empirical stuff. It's more the theoretical stuff. And in sociology, we were reading Marx and Foucault, and I started realizing that what they're doing is philosophy. Mm-hmm. I also had a lot of friends who I had friends who I met through music who went to U Chicago and did their undergrad in philosophy. So I always heard them having these conversations about philosophy, and I didn't understand it. And it seemed really interesting, but I didn't know how to enter into those conversations. Mm-hmm. So once I got to DePaul and like took my first philosophy 100 class with Avery Goldman, I immediately knew that this is where I'm supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Because there were people suddenly asking the same questions that I was asking. And I really loved the readings. I really loved having like these really interesting, in-depth conversations about philosophical stuff. So.
And you mentioned Foucault and Marx were like the two major influences. Were those like what you think set the foundation for how you wanted to do philosophy after that, or was there someone really significant? Like you mentioned Fanon with your current dissertation work, but was there someone then?
Yeah. Before I took a philosophy class, I actually read Nietzsche. I read Beyond Good and Evil, and I don't think I understood it really. I mean, no one can really understand Nietzsche, but I didn't. I have a better grasp on Nietzsche now, but when I read it then, there was something about it that really made me want to do more and made me think about my life in a completely different way. It kind of matched, it was like something that I was looking for, and suddenly there's this guy who's like with this like really polemic speech, and I felt like really seen, you know? And then when I in undergrad I read some Marx and Foucault and stuff like that too, and I really liked them a lot, but really it was Nietzsche for
No,
sure. Yeah.
it definitely is, and he has like a greater influence, even like fashion choices to the turtlenecks that we're both rocking for this is like one of those things that came with him, I guess. Okay, and since that's kind of like laid a little bit of a groundwork for what you do in philosophy, which you mentioned before with your bands. So I did looked into your discography, and it was like 10 plus years. And so you mentioned your first or your current band, Negative Scanner. And so how did you first become a musician? What were like those founding influences for you there?
So how did I first start become a musician? My mom we had a guitar at home, but I didn't know what to do with it. But then when I moved to Chicago when I was like 19, I bought an electric guitar and I started going to shows, these like really small garage rock, like DIY shows and stuff like that, and wanted to start making music. And so I'm completely self-taught. I like bought a guitar off Craigslist, and I was completely self-taught. I had like one friend, like just moved to Chicago, I had one friend and decided that I wanted to write music. And so I started writing music, and with that one friend, we started a band. And ever since then, that has been like most of my life for like the last like over 10 years. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds, I mean, I've personally listened to it and I really like it. I'm more into punk music anyway. So, but was there a specific inspiration that you went to that genre, or is there like something key to punk music that you felt was like expressive in a certain way?
Um, I started out making pop music because
All
I
right.
didn't think about it too hard. I just like wrote whatever I felt like writing. And it came out as like pop music, which was like my first band. But later on, when me and my friend Tom, our drummer, when we ended that band, I was listening to darker music and stuff that's more, I was listening to more punk and more hardcore and more post-punk and stuff like that. So yeah, my taste kind of changed. My voice changed too. And we just kind of took it from there, really.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
so
know.
cool. And so you
Yeah.
kind of mentioned a little bit about like the community is what kind of brought you into one philosophy, and then also with music, you just knew a friend and you end up falling into this like scene or like this subculture. And so was there a certain event that kind of came out that you're like particularly proud of? So I know that you opened for Proto Martyr last year, and then was
Oh
that like one of your
yeah,
highlights, or
one
was there something
year.
like that?
Yeah, we actually, our last show was with Proto Martyr almost exactly a year ago. At Sleeping Village, like the Wednesday or Thursday um before Pritzker like put us all on lockdown. But no, yeah, I've had a lot of really great experiences with my band. It's allowed me to travel the United States like several times over. I've like in a car with like 3 other people, up to 8 other people. Yeah, it's allowed me to travel and meet a lot of people across the US. And then we went on tour. It was actually my first year of grad school. I had to take 3 weeks off of school to go tour in Europe and the UK. And that was really memorable. We bookended the tour with a couple of really big shows with this band called Sleepard Mods. And we played with them back here in Brooklyn, and we got flown out to New York and really felt like rock stars. It was great.
That's
But
cool.
yeah, I've met so many like really wonderful people. Yeah. And I was like actually worried that being a musician and being in grad school for philosophy was going to be hard. But when I was in undergrad, my Aristotle professor, Sean Kirkland, pulled me aside one day, was like, I need to talk to you after class. And I was like, oh, okay. And he hands me a paper, and the paper says like, so you want to go to grad school or something like that. And he said that like he heard of my band, not because I told him, but because he saw our review on Pitchfork. It was like kind of embarrassing. He pulled me aside and was like, you can be a musician and be in grad school at the same time. And he told me about another grad student who was also a touring musician. And that was like really inspiring. I mean, really encouraging for someone to say that to me, because music at the time, applying to grad school, music was and is still like my life. And I have to do things like take 3 weeks off, and I wasn't sure if I could do that in grad school, but I was. So yeah, it's been a trip.
No, that sounds really interesting. And do you feel like when it's not difficult, I think, for you, or you're finding the time for it? And is it something that you think is like a juggling, or is it more that there's like a cutback that you're taking in one area versus another, or are you just organizing? What is that like strategy that you have in place?
Over the years, there's definitely been some give and take. I think more recently, now that I've had to work more on my dissertation, a lot of my energy goes to that. Plus, I mean, we haven't been playing shows because of COVID, but I have always needed to do both in a way, like. And in a way, like going to grad school allowed me to do music too, just because like of how the academic like schedule works. Usually I have more time in the summer to tour. I have a spring break to tour. I have winter break to tour, even though that was like a disaster, and I will probably try to tour during the winter again. But yeah, and I mean, with everything I have to juggle and I have to figure it out, but how do I say this? I love making music and the people that I know through music. That's like my entire community and family, like living in Chicago, like everyone I know, pretty much I know through music, except for now the people that I know through grad school. But I could not just let that go. Which is also why I wanted to go to grad school in Chicago, because I wanted to stay in my band. Like my bandmates are like my family basically, and the people I know through music. I wouldn't want to quit music to go to grad school. Like I was never going to do that. So I just have to make it work no matter what. And of course it's hard, but like, yeah.
And so how do you think that like the community has changed, or that your work has changed going into COVID? You mentioned like that one of your last shows was played last year. And how are you keeping up with that still? Are you still practicing in person? Are you doing it through anything, or it's just like individual, you all working just as hard to keep it going?
We stopped practicing during the summer. We tried to practice a few times, and it was a mix of like, I don't know how safe this is for us to do. And then also we weren't writing new music at the time. Like I wasn't writing new music at the time. So we didn't really have much to go on. Plus my bandmates have other stuff going on in their lives. Nick has another band that he's in, and Tom has a shop, and Matt has to work, and he also has other music going on. So we just kind of let it go. Yeah, I've been writing new music.
Oh, awesome. Cool.
For sure. Yeah. I'm a really slow songwriter, but like I've been writing new music for sure. But it's definitely more difficult, and if we want to make music now, we have to adjust to being apart. So tracking on our own. I think we'll start practicing soon though. We're gonna get the vaccine, I'm sure, and even before then we can figure it out. But for the most part, we've kind of dropped it. Well, I don't want to say dropped it. We kind of let it go a little bit because it's hard enough. Like COVID's hard enough. Quarantine's hard
Definitely.
enough. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so this is maybe a weird question. Is your writing process for music similar to how your writing process for your dissertation and your
No,
philosophical work, or are those?
no. That's a good question. No. It's not nothing, nothing alike at all. Uh, Writing music is something totally different. I mean, I write music by myself with my
Okay.
guitar, and I write poetry, and that's where my lyrics come from. But writing philosophy is very more. It's much more. How do I say it? I have to be more focused.
Mhm.
I have to work on my writing like very methodically and analytically, which I don't necessarily do with music. I think some philosophical ideas come about in similar ways, and they certainly influence each other for me.
Mhm.
But writing in philosophy, writing a paper is like, I don't even know how to write a paper. I'm like supposed to be writing this one really long paper. I don't know how to write it. So it is very different, um, but actually, what I want to do with my dissertation is be a little bit more creative too.
Mm.
So maybe
Okay.
I can like work in some of that um, more creative writing that I do with music. Like maybe I
Mhm.
could work that more into my dissertation. I think it's important for what I'm trying to do
Yeah,
for
definitely.
sure.
I can see. I mean, we'll hear probably more about that at the end because I'm kind of interested in hearing about it. But then you mentioned how they're different processes, but do you find that the similarities in philosophy that have influenced your music? You said like you couldn't do one without the other, but what is the what is that influence that you're seeing? Do you like can you name it, or is it something that you just kind of figure out that like they have these two aspects of yourself that you're trying to like exercise, or what do you see there?
Yeah. It's funny because like for the longest time being in grad school and even in undergrad and making music, I they were always two very separate things, like different groups of people that I was talking to about these things. Different blocks of time that I was working on them. Like they're very, very separate. But yeah, and I mean, people in grad school sometimes don't even know that I'm like a in philosophy or
Hmm.
whatever. I mean, no, people in grad school don't know I'm a musician, and people who know me through music don't know that I'm a philosopher
Okay.
sometimes. But I mean, I started making music before I started doing philosophy. And so I think of music more philosophically now,
Okay.
for sure. And sometimes when I do philosophy, I think of examples that I know through music, like especially doing philosophy of mind, for
Hmm.
sure. But I definitely think of music more philosophically. Actually, I think philosophy in some ways has given me the words, like this is a very hermeneutical thing, big word there. Philosophy in some ways has given me the words to describe experiences that I have with music that I didn't quite have the words for, or maybe I had like sort of more poetic words for it, but now I have these very philosophical words to describe the experience of being a musician.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And we actually have a question in the chat from Brianna Hernandez. So have you found that you utilize more philosophical concepts in your songs? So you just said like trying to make sense of the experience as a musician. And is there a way to perhaps bring up these concepts without being didactic in songwriting? So you addressed a little bit
Yeah.
of it, but do you find that they're like implementing things like verbatim or like just an idea that sparked a sentence or a lyric or a line of poetry?
Oh, for sure. Hey, Brianna, by the way. So I a lot I basically have ripped off philosophers in my song lyrics a lot. Like I have a song about will to power. I mean, I have a song on our most recent record that is basically straight out of thus spoke Zarathustra, like for sure. And I think that like if I if I had to like look at my own lyrics and try to interpret them philosophically, it would be a wash because it would sound like complete nonsense. You know what I mean? And so like maybe I'm sort of more like Nietzsche in that way where it sounds like complete nonsense. But um really like I don't think that, how do I say this? Um sorry, I want to look back at your question.
It's okay.
Is there a way to bring up the concepts without being didactic in songwriting? Honestly, I just do it because I don't think no one has ever really, people will interpret lyrics any way they want to. Even I will go back and reinterpret my own lyrics in different ways as time goes on. And so I think that, like, for me, I just write whatever I want to, even if it sounds didactic and even if it sounds, you know, like whatever. Because I think that, like, once you put out a creative work, it's out of your hands in a way, as far as how it's going to be interpreted by other people. And like, yeah. Yeah.
And so this is another maybe broad question. Is there like an intention you have when you do music? Do you find that you're doing it for a specific purpose, or like is there a drive that makes you want it besides just like to have this? Like, what is that for you?
I don't know. You know, this sounds really cheesy, but I just always imagined myself being on stage making music. There's sort of a glamour about playing music that always really attracted me. And it's also a way of expressing myself. I mean, I love singing. I think it feels good. It feels good to sing, and it's exciting to work with my bandmates to create something. It's really fun, and I've always been a really creative person in one way or the other, and so it just comes out in different ways. And music just happened to stick. Like, I've done a lot of different types of art and stuff like that, but music like really stuck, and it helped to have a lot of people to help me and mentor me and support me for that to happen. Yeah. But I mean, it's fun. It's just like really fun. And yeah, I mean, I don't know I've never actually thought about like why I make music. I just do. I'm just compelled to make music.
No, that sounds awesome. That's kind of cool. So have it like that, you know, you do it, and there's no reasoning, or like nothing that you can quite pin down. I think that's amazing.
Yeah. I always think of it as, yeah, an end in itself. It's just itself is valuable. It doesn't need a reason to be valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very, yeah.
Very, you'd say Aristotelian, or was it the?
I was gonna say Kantian, but I don't think that is at all. I was just trying to make a joke.
It's okay. And so maybe this is a good time to move on to another aspect of your, I guess I wouldn't say a career, but like another aspect of your life, and that's at the activism. And so you mentioned a little bit in the introduction about your work with Black and Pink. Are you able to go into a little bit further depth about what the organization is and what exactly your role is alongside them?
Yeah. So Black and Pink Chicago is like a chapter of like a national organization called Black and Pink. And we are a family of LGBTQ people who are inside and outside of prison, who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and allies, such as myself. So we do a lot of work to add, like, through direct assistance, through advocacy, through education. We do a lot of work to support people, LGBTQ people who are incarcerated or formerly incarcerated. Then I'm specifically in a working group, like a subgroup of Black and Pink Chicago called the Civil Commitment Working Group, where we're primarily working on a community-based participatory action research project about civil commitment in Illinois. And I specifically work on, I'm working on the research part of it and also the archive. So we're creating a public archive with some of the materials that we've received from people who are at a facility called Rushville Treatment and Detention Center here in Illinois.
And so you mentioned it a little bit. and this is like one of these unfamiliar terms to me, and I had to do some research beforehand, but like what exactly is civil commitment and what is that field? Yeah, so what is that in this literature?
Yeah, so civil commitment is basically for people who went to prison for a sex offense, before they finish their sentence, they basically go through, they go through this evaluation that determines whether or not they are safe to re-enter society. And what happens is if they don't kind of check all the boxes, if they check all these specific boxes that makes them seem like a risk, then after they finish their sentence at IDOC, at the Department of Corrections, they are sent to another detention facility called civil commitment. So basically, if the state deems you a sexually dangerous or sexually violent person, then you're sent to a special facility. And once you get to this facility, although it is under, technically it's DHS, so it's the Department of Health and Human Services. It's technically a prison, but the thing is that they're there indefinitely, so they don't have a sentence when they get there. Whether they're there depends on depends on their evaluations and how well they kind of progress through these phases of treatment. But what has actually ended up happening is more people have died there than have actually been released. And so they're there, like the people who are in the civil commitment facility are basically there doing a life sentence, even though they have already completed their sentence, their court mandated sentence at IDOC. It's kind of like Minority Report, if you've ever seen that film or read that PKD book. So basically, it's some dystopian kind of stuff. Basically, they say, well, there's this much of a chance that you're going to reoffend, so we're going to lock you up just in case for your life or until like you're better. But the treatment is not aimed at rehabilitation. It's more like punishment. So many people end up never leaving, and a lot of people have died there.
Yeah. I mean, I got to see a little bit of it in the articles that you sent over beforehand, and it's kind of freaky just to see how all these different branches of like government and treatment and incarceration are all working together and extending their reach on these people past when they have like their official hold, and this like kind of maintaining in some other form, like through the health and human services. That's pretty freaky to me. And you mentioned that these are people that were incarcerated for sexual offenses. And is there like a specific tension or like aspect of that you kind of come across when advocating for them through Black and Pink, or some other aspect of like allyship with them?
Yeah, I think that doing abolition work is already hard. I mean, yes, there's a lot of tensions there. And it really shows that abolition work isn't just about doing sort of practical things, but it's also about rethinking our core values in the way that we see good and bad, or victim and perpetrator. Because I mean, one of the main tensions there is that I'm also a survivor of sexual assault. And so I'm advocating for people who went to prison for very similar kinds of sexual harm that I am also a victim of. But I think in abolition, we have to think about it this way, is that the prison system causes more harm, including sexual harm, by incarcerating people. And so if I want to as a survivor, be an advocate for other survivors, I also have to advocate for people who are in prison, because the prison system itself is a violent place, including a sexually violent place. And so there is a tension there, but the way that I see it is that if we hold on to this binary that there's only a victim and then there's only a perpetrator, I think that is sort of more harmful, because in a way, the people who are incarcerated are also survivors of violence, including sexual violence too. And I don't think that anyone, regardless of what they've done in their lives, deserves to be locked up for life and forgotten, basically like disappeared. Is what is happening to the people who are at Rushville, because it's so isolated from the rest of the world. No one knows that it exists. No one knows that there are people living out life sentences for a crime that they didn't ever commit. Like, no one knows about that, and no one wants to advocate for people who do some who have done this kind of harm. But that's also why it's incredibly important for me to do that. And I've met some really, really incredible people, some really, really good friends who I talk to as often as I talk to family, who are at Rushville. And those are like incredibly meaningful connections for me too.
And it seems like you're also doing another aspect of like this community building, like that you've done with music and philosophy so far. It sounds like you're almost constructing these like bridges across where there was no connection before, at least with abolition, especially. Like, you're talking to people that otherwise would not have any form of contact beyond the prison walls. And you've also mentioned it earlier with like the archive. And part of your work is like establishing testimonies about how the experiences are inside these treatment facilities. Is there like these are there other aspects to the archive that you're developing apart from that, or what is the feel of that?
Yeah, so basically with the archive, it's really exciting. So we sent out a survey to people at Rushville to kind of get an idea of the types of conditions and things that are happening at Rushville. And when we got the surveys back, people sent us a whole lot of documents about their lives, from art to poetry to sort of the grievance forms that they fill out. And they've sent us like newsletters that they have written, like, and circulate like at the facility and stuff like that. And it's just like an incredible amount of stuff that really gives you an idea of what life might be like at Rushville. And so I was sort of the facilitator for the archiving project, and I still am, but I've gone through with my hands every single document that they sent in, and like could feel like there's something about holding like a tangible piece of paper that someone filled out, like this grievance form, and it starts to really like create this world. And I really think that people need to see that for sure. So this semester we have an intern. I'm very excited. A library master's student who is assisting us with the scanning and cataloging and stuff like that. So hopefully soon we're going to have that up, and we'll have not all of it will be available to the public, but we're going to have like a curated portion of it available online so that people can look through it. And then our plan is that we're also going to release our key findings and recommendations report from the survey, hopefully by the end of this semester or the middle of the year or so that we can kind of help educate other people about civil commitment, and also continue to build community with people inside and stuff like that.
Awesome. That's so cool. And this is something I just kind of thought of right now, but is there So there's a two-part question. One, do you find that the project is based around almost humanizing people that otherwise would have been forgotten, or do you think it's something like building up this archive and building this information up to then make a case for all the injustices that are going on within the prison system? Is it like a dual project, or is it
Yeah,
something
I
you
think both.
Mm.
Yeah, because people inside want their stories to be heard and want people to know what's going on. And they also want us to contact like the people who are making our laws. They want us to make policy recommendations and stuff like that. Sometimes it's difficult as an abolitionist organization to say that, like, okay, ultimately we want to shrink this facility down until it no longer exists. Sometimes it's hard to separate what types of actions are abolition, what types of action are reformist, because we don't want to do reformist actions. But yeah, for me, the most important part for me is working with the people that I know at Rushville and attending to their needs, and they're my friends, and so they also, and it's a two-way street. They're there for me when I need them to. But sometimes like there's direct service work that needs to be done. Like if they need like a specific kind of advocacy that's more immediate, like those are things that are really important too. And for me, that stuff takes priority. The research stuff and the education stuff is like really, really important. And the archive is really, really important to get the word out as well. But also for me, it's about having those weekly conversations with my friends and seeing what it is they need and how can we work on the system in such a way where they don't need to be in this situation anymore, and no one does. Yeah.
So, and apart from, we have a bunch of comments and compliments to your work in the chat, and there's also a question that's posed from Brianna again. Does this get archived through the national org? So your work is pretty much specific to Rushville, at least with building that archive. Does that then communicate it to Black and Pink nationally, or?
So we work pretty independently, even though we're like a chapter of the national organization. We work pretty independently. So we're doing it ourselves as a chapter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And hopefully, so we also, one project also that we've been working on, like trying to make sure that we can do it, is we started this collaboration with a group called StoryCorps. They do some stuff on NPR. But that's going to be about recording conversations that we have with our people in Rushville. And those are going to be like in the Library of Congress. So
that's so cool. That's really like a tangible like representation of all the work that you've been doing. And maybe just to kind of tie it back into, and because I'm seeing some trends, like when you've recognized that like the work that you do with these people that are in the treatment facilities, that's not so much changing the system, but also changing these mechanisms and thought processes that happen beyond it. So this dynamic of victim versus perpetrator, is that something you feel as being like an aspect of philosophical work that you're doing in this activism, or do you find philosophy influences you another way?
Yeah, absolutely. In a way, I think of all of these things together. So part of my dissertation, I think, talks about I honestly have no idea how to talk about my dissertation, but like, how do I say that? How do I start to say this? So we have to like really look at what we think of, like of how we are valuing things when we think of something as good and bad, when we think of people as good and bad, when we think of good people are not in prison and bad people are in prison, like that sort of value, that it doesn't even have to do with politics. It doesn't have to do with the court system, like not in the explicit way that you're thinking of. That has to do with how I see the world. And actually the way that I see the world has been shaped by basically by the prison industrial complex, and if you want to take it a step further, by colonialism. But like the prison industrial complex in a way influences the way that we see people as good and evil or good and bad, and it uses that to justify putting people in prison. And so in a way, my dissertation asks us to look at our own values and to reevaluate them. That's like also very niche, and to reevaluate them, because if we really like reflect on those things, we find that actually something like the prison industrial complex uses that to lock up more people, and to lock up mostly like Black and brown people, and make money off of keeping people in cages. So
yeah, that's freaky. I mean, I say freaky is an understatement. One, it's a reaction to say that all these things are at work and it's hard to recognize it and explain to people that haven't yet recognized that. And then on top of it, communicating what some people would see as being these like very abstract philosophical concepts. You're pretty much just actualizing them and showing this is where they're at play, and whether or not they see it, it's actually there.
yeah.
So man, that's hard. So do you find that the education you're doing is like employing everything that you've learned through these years, like when not only philosophical concepts and thinking, but also how do I say this? Like, is there a pedagogy to doing this that you find that's distinct with this work versus philosophy?
I don't know. In a way, I think that they influence each other a lot. The work that I do with Black and Pink, and my music really influences my philosophical work. And I don't want that to go I want to cite that, you know what I mean? I have to add that somehow to my citations or talk about it in some way. It can't just be this implicit influence, because a lot of that influences my philosophical work. And going back, my philosophical work influences the way that I think about these issues and the way that I do the work in Black and Pink. So I have to do them both together, I think, if that makes sense. It's important to me that I do the work together. I don't think it's necessary for anyone to need to do philosophy to do advocacy work or to be a prison abolitionist. I don't think it is. I think there's a lot of tools out there for us to like learn and more and build the types of communities we want to live in. I mean, people already are doing it and they never needed philosophy, but I need philosophy for sure.
And so that's another question I had, and I was also thinking about this before. Is I think when I first met you, I'd asked, "It's like, well, where do you start? Like when someone that wants to be an activist or just to get involved, it's always that like, well, I don't know enough. I don't have all this all thought out. What do I do to start?"
Yeah,
You seem to... Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't know anything about it. I wasn't even sure if I was like a prison abolitionist or like, I mean, I was still calling the cops like up until like a few years ago. And that's, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, but yeah, like I look back that's the thing, right? And I think of this actually in regards to existentialism and having that crisis, that existential crisis. There's going to be a point where you look back and realize that like, oh, I've been doing some really terrible things and I don't want to do those terrible things anymore. So you just have to jump into it and expect that you're going to be humbled, that you're going to learn. Because yeah, I just went because I had a friend who was doing it, and one day they had an event where it was like research, and I was like, oh, I do research, like maybe I could help. And then I never stopped. I just kept doing it and learning more and more. And no one jumps in knowing a ton. You don't have to know a ton. You just have to know that you want to do something, and then keep evaluating, keep being critical of yourself and your own work to make sure that you're not like still messing up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. No, that's kind of interesting. So like when your acts inform what you're doing, and then you're also learning along the way. And another question that I was thinking about is, oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. But this is another question. So you said research, and I know this is another tension we've, I think, talked about beforehand, because obviously we've had conversations, but like, you don't quite define it as activism, like broadly, but we also call it that for the sake of like, kind of, because it is abolition work, and you would say abolition is first, activist second. Is there like an order, or is there like a defined
You
way that you
know,
define it?
I never called myself an activist. I don't even see myself as that. I don't even know what it is, what it means to be an activist. Like, I only have this stereotype of what an activist is in my head, where it's like it's someone who goes to protests. And I don't even really like going to protest. I mean, I've been to a few, but like, so I don't know. I don't call myself that. I think maybe other people who see me might call me that, but I never saw myself as that. Even saying prison abolitionist, even saying abolitionist is hard, because in a way, how am I an abolitionist? I'm not. I believe in abolition. I know it. I like can read a book and think about why, all the good reasons why abolition is right, and believe that. But what am I actually doing in my life that is abolitionist? Like, I'm trying like as hard as I possibly can. Like, I'm doing what I can. But so I'm kind of hesitant of even saying that I'm either of those things. I just do what I think is right, and it happens to be doing work with Black and Pink because I also love it, and it's incredibly meaningful. I need those connections. I need to do the work. I'm compelled to. That's like anything that I do, is I do it because I don't have a choice to do it. I'm compelled to do it. So yeah, I say abolitionist because it gives me a label that I think other people will understand, or activists, you can say that too. But I don't, but it is weird calling myself that. I've just come around to calling myself a musician, and more recently a philosopher. And so like the abolitionist or activist, I'm not quite there yet, but I'll happily call myself a musician and a philosopher. That's probably imposter syndrome sneaking in.
Maybe.
But
And so do you see music coming in at any point? Like these are these like very, it feels like almost radically different parts of your life. Is there like one area where they all intersect, either like within your, would you say like what you just do it, like you're called to do it? There's no aspect of like almost like, not that you lack decision, but you just are committed wholeheartedly without necessarily needing to think about it. Do you find music came into similar influence with like abolition work or with philosophy? Like, do these all come together in a certain way?
yeah, I mean, they all overlap in some
Mhm.
ways. The reason how I got into Black and Pink was through people that I knew through music, and I would do we would do benefit shows and stuff like that. Yeah, but yeah, and actually, some people in Black and Pink didn't even know that I was a musician.
Mhm.
So it's kind of weird. I have my hand in the different cookie jars, or what, I don't know the phrase. But like I do a lot of things because I feel I could not live with myself if I didn't do some of this work.
Mhm.
For me, I mean, this sounds, I I tend to take things to the, as far as meaning goes, I tend to take them to the extreme because I'm an existentialist. I'll say that. I'll give myself that label too, existentialist. But these things actually give my life meaning. Like, and that sounds cheesy, but it's true. Like, my life would literally have no meaning if I didn't do philosophy, abolition work, and create something creative, whether it's music or something else. Like, those are the things that make my life worth living. And it sounds like, even saying it now, it's like, God, really? Like, so this is some like holier than thou like kind of stuff. But actually, it's true. Yeah, for me.
Yeah. And we have another question that came up in chat, and it's, do you think researching and understanding political ideas like prison abolition is a form of activism? And this is Heather. She's my cohort. She said, what I mean is, do you think understanding prison abolition works toward abolition itself? So it's like a
That's
question of
great.
how. Mhm.
That's a great question. I think that phenomenologically, I think that there is already transformation in learning about it, but I don't think that that's enough, for sure. And I think, actually, I have this is in my dissertation a little bit too, because Fanon, I think, says something similar to this. I mean, he was an abolitionist in a way, but like, I mean, I say that he wasn't an abolitionist in the way that I am. He was a decolonial revolutionary, but I think that it's important to learn. And like I said, phenomenologically, I think that there is transformation in reflecting on that, because whether we know it or not, it's like the prison industrial complex affects the way that we see the world. But I don't think that it can end there. It can't, because a lot of people say that, well, you know, we need to work on building a better world, and like, we need to make a better future. We need to imagine what the future can be like. We need to imagine what the world could be like without prisons. And I think that's really important. That's a really important part of abolition. But the thing is that some people forget is that there are people who are in prison right now who need to get out of prison right now. And that immediacy, for me, is more important than reading more theory. Like, for me, they can't wait for our perfect future, with no prisons. They can't wait for that. They need it now. And like, so reading, I think, is, yeah, like I said, it's transformative for sure. It transforms us. But my friend who has been in prison since like 92 is not going to wait until I finish reading this book. Do you know what I mean? And I'm glad that, Heather, I'm glad that you asked that question. It's a really good question. Yeah, because I mean, I like reading about abolition, and educating each other about abolition is really important. But abolition isn't about me. It's not about me. It's about the people who are locked up.
Yeah. That's really intense, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because it is one. I don't know. I think also everyone who also hears about activism is always like, I'm guilty, I'm not doing enough. But it seems like you're even not only saying like guilty, not doing enough, but there's like a certain call that you're kind of hearkening to, and you're saying, well, I can see when that philosophical work is important, and you're implementing it in this very tangible way. And I don't know. It seems like how do you make the time to do this apart from all your other work? But you're just doing it because you almost feel like you have no choice. Like, there's this why. Like, there's no other why not that's possible. Yeah. Which is cool.
And I don't want to seem like I'm mad at anyone who's not doing the same work. You know what I mean? Because in a way, everyone comes to it in their own way. Everyone will come to it in their own way. And if you're not ready, then you're not ready. And when you are ready, like, and that goes, and people go through waves too. Sometimes I can work a lot on this stuff. Sometimes I just can't. And that's okay too. So I don't want to seem like, I don't want to shame anyone because, you know, you're not doing the work or something like that. That's like not what I want to do. Like, people will come to it when they're ready. But yeah, for me, like I said, I'm compelled to do it. And I believe that, like, if you read about abolition, and if you talk to people who are in prison, and if you believe the testimony of the people who are inside, and you believe that, you know, the history that is written about how the prison industrial complex has come to be, how it is basically descended from slavery and those types of structures. Like, if you believe those things, I think that it's hard not to do something about it. But that can look a lot of different ways. That can look a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to look the way that I'm doing it, basically. But yeah. And I think that, like, I do, because you asked, like, how do I find the time?
Yeah. It seems like there's so much going on all the time. Like, you're a musician touring, and then grad school on top of it. And then, like, not even only grad school, but grad school involves you chalking up time to do other stuff like TA ships or your own homework. So, like, where do you get that?
Um, You know, I don't know. It's for me, that existential nausea of not that anxiety of needing to do something with my life, like really, it hits me hard. It's like really funny, but it's true. And actually, the truth is I almost dropped out of grad school 2 times. I mean, for a lot of different reasons. I've had to put down my black and pink work before for weeks at a time. I didn't write music for months. I didn't write a new song for months at a time. And so it sometimes on paper, it seems like I do a lot. And I have done a lot, but like, it's harder than it looks. And I'm not juggling 3 things where my schedule is packed. I have to take time to take care of myself first, always. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm like this Superman who can do a ton of work, and still come out alive, because actually what happened was I almost dropped out. Out twice. And it was hard. And I needed other people to support me, including people at Loyola. Our last grad program director and my dissertation advisor for Hannah Jacobs was crucial in making sure that I succeeded, and gave me the space to be able to do stuff like MAP, like being a musician, but also foster my philosophical work. Like having that kind of support from Hannah, from my bandmates, from my other people in Black and Pink, and my friends inside from Black and Pink, having their support was like crucial in doing it. Because I sometimes we take on too much. Like I didn't need to take on that much. Being grad school is enough. Like I could just stick with one thing. My life would be easy. But I want to do all these things, and having support really, really was a huge part of it.
Yeah.
So.
Unfortunately, we're getting close to time, and I want to make sure, and I also don't want to be reductive in saying this. It's nice to see that when it came from this urge and you being thrown into this community or exploring it, and then that community that came around to kind of support you, and you're supporting them and interacting in all these ways, and it's just amazing to see that that hasn't changed across the entire, I guess I wouldn't say journey, but like the entire process. It's always been about the people that you're with, and that's really amazing.
Yeah.
But is there last like anything you want to throw out or like promote during this time for Black and Pink or otherwise?
No, I'm hoping, like I keep telling myself, that like in roughly a year, I'll have straight teeth and a PhD and a new album, and the research report will come out. So this is going to be a very formative year. Oh, and I received the Schmidt Fellowship as well, and that is, thank you so much. And so I'm really excited for this year. Hopefully, like in a year, you'll see me performing live on stage, also surrounded by other people, but still wearing masks probably, but we'll see. So, and thanks. Sure. Yeah, and thanks for having me. And thanks for everyone who came to watch me like babble on about myself.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for being so open, and a couple of people are already appreciating it as well. So it was a great time. So thanks for doing this. And then thank you for everyone again, just to reiterate. And if there's any further questions or anything that you need help contacting with, either the organizers, me, or Gina, or Rebecca, our emails were in the chat, but if not, mine is rramirez12@luc.edu. There's also information about MAP and other programming that happens there. And if there's any undergraduates watching, there's a bunch of information about MAP on the Discord and then through the department website too. But otherwise, I think that pretty much wraps it up. And thank you everyone again for joining and for participating in the chat. That's really helpful.